Hello, everyone. Um, so on the hangman problem, I'm not sure what happened, but those REPLs were screwed up and the links weren't working. What happens when, for me, they go to the thing, but I guess they don't for you. Is that right? Waiting
For
for
me,
an answer.
sorry, for me they went to the like REPL Teams page.
Yeah, let me see if I can fix that. And also, for some reason, some of them had code in them, and I don't know why. And I fixed that, but it's too late to undo that. Not very happy about that. So check character, check a string for a character. I'm going to try to fix this real quick. I literally just found this out and I need to fix this, and I want to fix it so that you guys can try it out right now. Um, um, copy. I'm going to see if this works. All right. It's only taking me a second. Second one is that word. Yeah. Okay, we'll try that. Um, Go see if the step one link works for you, and if that works, then I can do that with all the rest of them. For some reason, there was a change in the way words guess. There was a change in the way REPL did their things, and I
The
didn't.
link worked for me this time.
It did work for you.
Yeah.
Good. I'm gonna really quickly. Okay, printing step 3. Convert to link. Step 3. Get words guessed. Sorry, I just need to get this done because I didn't know it was messed up. Um, and get available letters. Convert to link. Hang on, convert to link. All of them should work now. Don't know what happened. Don't know what REPL did to me or if I screwed something up or what. But anyway, so because of that, when is this due? Because of these problems, it's not due until next Monday. So you got more time on this. In fact, and let's start out. Does anybody have any questions on the Hangman Lab? Okay, so um, it should, it still will say December 3 here, but the actual Moodle assignment will change to next Monday. So the idea for this lab, again, is to do exactly what we did with the C++, with the Python version. I have 4 replets for you to finish, and then you use those replets, use the code from those replets in your final solution. And I think it all works now. So hopefully, let me know if it doesn't ASAP. Okay. Um, before we talk about files today, which is what we're going to talk about, last time we learned some about classes, and we saw that classes, let's spend a little bit of time talking about that. We saw that classes were much the same, but also quite a bit different at the same time between Python and C++. And I gave you some code. In fact, let's talk about it a little bit. If I go in here and make C++ create REPL. So here is, wait, gotta find the, I'm looking for the C++. In C++, when we want to make a class, we actually make two files for each class. We make a C++ file, and we make an H file. And as we talked about last time, but I just wanted to reiterate it today, does anybody remember what the purpose of the H file versus the purpose of the C++ file was?
The H file was for headers, so which I guess defines the data types for the variables, and the other one was what to do with them, or like in a
Right.
sort of the functions in the C++, the second one.
Right. So if I grab this account.h code here, and I'll put it in here, what we see is basically this defines the interface for the class. Interfaces are really important in computer science. And an interface is a way of something connecting to something else. Now, we use interfaces all the time, right? When we plug something into the wall, that's a 110 volt interface, right? That's a way of connecting a device like your laptop to the power system. So the plug is an interface. The steering wheel is an interface in your car, and the gas pedal, right? And the door handle, and the buttons that roll the windows up and down, or the crank, depending on what you have, right? Those are all interfaces that allow you to control things, that allow you to do things to things, right? The keyboard is an interface, and a mouse is an interface. So the H file is the interface for a class. And so when we look at this, when we define a class in C++, kind of like what we do in Python, we say, hey, we're going to create a new class. We say class, the name of the class, and then we have brackets around all of the interface. And then we have a semicolon at the end. Within the class, it turns out, and this is something we didn't see in Python. And again, Python's implementation of object-oriented methodology is actually horrible, right? Purists, serious computer scientists hate Python because it's not well done. And it leaves things out. Python doesn't have the notion of an interface like this. And you're supposed to have that when you do classes. Python also doesn't have this notion that we see here of public and private. It turns out that within a class, sometimes we have things that are public, and sometimes we have things that are private. Now, this is true in actual real world things as well, like an automobile, right? The public things are all the controls that you can use as a driver of the car or as a participant in the car, you know, the buttons for the windows and everything else. But it turns out there's other controls in the car. There's other things in the car that only auto mechanic can get to, right? Turns out when you take your car to an auto mechanic, the first thing they do is they plug a computer into there's a connector underneath the steering wheel that you may or may not have noticed. They plug a cable into there that goes to their diagnostic equipment, and they can look at what's wrong with your car, and they can actually change settings in your car, right? And those are like private things. They don't let everybody do that. Only the people who get behind the surface are allowed to mess with those things. So in a C++ class, the public is the actual interface. It's the thing that the public is allowed to see. So we see here, the public is allowed to create an account, and there's two ways they can create an account, right? And we don't use init in C++, we use the word account, because that's the name of the class, which actually makes more sense, by the way, than Python. In case you're seeing my preference between classes for C++ and Python, you are definitely seeing that. And so this is a constructor that we don't pass any parameters to. This is a constructor that we give it a type string, a customer name string, and a balance. And the balance is optional, right? Because just like in Python, we're giving it a default value if we don't pass it. So there are some similarities. Now, we oftentimes divide up, and this is true in Python and C++, we divide up our interface by types of things. Constructors are ways of making this thing. Accessors are ways of getting data out. Mutators are ways of changing things. So we see accessor allows us to get the balance, and it returns a double. Get type gets the type. Get name gets the name. And then we have a mutator. Mutator changes the account, right? We can withdraw a certain amount, or we can deposit a certain amount. So we call that a mutator. And both of those return doubles, right? So things are very well and tightly defined in C++. When we define a function, we always say what type of thing does it return. It may return nothing, and then we put in void. And then we show the function, and we show the function with its parameters, and we give a type for each parameter. Now, one thing that's kind of funny that you may have noticed, or maybe you didn't, is we didn't put anything in front of constructors. Constructors are different from other functions. They never return anything, and so we don't put void there. In fact, we're not even allowed to put void there. I mean, I can put void here, but if I try to run it, it'll give me an error. That's the one exception where we don't put a type in front of a function. Okay? So the private are things that are only accessible from within the function. In other words, main, which is obviously going to use account, is not allowed to look at these variables. We're hiding them, right? This is a concept, an important concept in object-oriented programming called information hiding. We hide the things we don't want people to know about. We do this, again, all the time, right? There's all sorts of information hidden underneath the surface of your automobiles that you don't need to know about yet. You don't need to know about the air-fuel ratio on your engine. There's variables that know that are hidden inside the computer, inside the engine, but you don't need to know that. You don't need to know the encryption keys that are being used by your cell phones. In fact, you know, Verizon or T-Mobile or whoever doesn't want you to know those. And so you're not even allowed to know certain things that are going on inside your phone. They're hidden, they're private, right? And so unlike Python, we can define the variables that are in the class. And by the way, if we want to, we can put a variable in the public area, then we can get to it. But if we put it in the private area, we're saying, nope, nobody can touch these except the account code. Now let me go grab the account code. The account.cpp code is what we call the implementation of the class. The H file is the interface, the account is the implementation, right? And so this is the hidden part, right? The users don't see this. Now in here, it works somewhat like Python, but one of the differences is basically the implementation is just a bunch of functions. That's all it is. And when we define the functions, what we do is we always put the name of the class before the function name, because this is our way of saying this isn't just an account. This isn't just a function called account. This is a function called account that's in the account class. This is a function called getBalance that's in the account class, right? We're associating these functions with the class. Now there's never any variables defined in here. Always all the variables associated with a class are defined inside of the .h, other than local variables that are inside of functions, but there's no class variables inside of the account. So these are just functions on the accounts, right? And they're regular functions. For example, getBalance, account, getBalance. What does it do? It returns balance. What is balance? Balance is a variable that's inside, hidden inside of the class. Okay? So then we have our main line. Our main line is, of course, the thing that is going to use the class. And so I have a whole bunch of code here, probably more than I need, but it was just. So here we have some code. Now, it turns out that I called these capital A and I called these lowercase a, so I guess I better fix that. Notice all those went away because now it knows about that other code. So how do I create things of a class? It's somewhat similar to Python. Here I'm saying, remember, in C++, when we want to make a new variable, like if I want to make a new integer, I can say integer a, and I could even say is equal to 3, right? Here I'm saying the type, the thing I want to make, and what I want to put in it. Now, it turns out I can also do this. We didn't talk about this earlier. Here we're saying we're making an a that's an integer, and we're going to put 3 in it. Now, this is exactly like what we're doing here. We're saying we want to make something that's an account. Here's the name of this account, and here's the things I want to put in it. Right? I'm constructing a new account. I'm going to call it account AC1, and it's going to have these values in it. I'm constructing something called AC2 that's of type account, and I'm putting these things in it. I'm constructing something called AC3 that's of type account, and I'm only putting these 2 things in it because remember, over here in the, oh, I have to fix this as well since I made it capital. Remember, account has a balance is equal to 0.0. That's my way of saying, hey, you don't have to pass this. If you don't pass it, it defaults to 0. So here I'm making an account. And then here, I'm printing out my information about account 1. Here I'm printing out. Now notice, I call getType to get the type. I call AC1 getName to get the name. I call AC1 getBalance to get the balance. And I do these for all 3 accounts. In fact, if I run this, we see I print out checking, that's the type. Bill Yakis, that's the name. 1000, that's the balance. And so here's my 3 accounts that I print out here. Then I do a deposit on account 1, a withdraw on account 2, a withdraw on account 3, and then I print them out again. And when I do withdraws, we notice if I try to withdraw more money than I have in the account, just like we did in the Python version, I print out a message, amount greater than balance. And since Lester Reynolds only had $0 in their account, we couldn't deduct or withdraw money. And so here we print everything out. Here we do some work, and here we print everything else out. Now, notice in Python, instead of saying get type, I could have just typed type here because there's a variable in here called type, but notice it doesn't work here. If I try to run it, I get an error. It says, I don't know what that is. Now, I want you to see a little, right, to see what's going on in C++, since type is private, I can't get to it from main. I can get to it from inside the account, but not from outside the account. It's private. Now watch this though. I can take string type and delete it here and put it here. I've moved it from the private section to the public section, and let's go up to main and let's run it again, and it runs. Why? Because type, and I don't know why it's still showing it red underline, because we saw it was okay, and it is okay because now it's a public variable. Anybody anybody can dig into the accounts and mess around with type. But the reason, and this is an important concept in object-oriented programming, the reason we put this here is the same reason why you don't have a knob on your dashboard that says fuel air mixture control, right? You could do that. They could actually put a knob on the dashboard of your car and let you mess around with the ratio of gasoline to air that gets mixed together before it gets injected into your engine. Now, why do you suppose they don't put that knob on your car? Yeah.
So you don't do anything really dumb to it?
Right.
That would make it break?
Right. It turns out that they actually used to have knobs like that on cars sometimes before I was born. And it was, in fact, they used to actually have something called a choke. That sometimes you have this on a lawnmower even now, but there was this lever that you pulled that would change the fuel air ratio to make it have a higher ratio of fuel to make the car easier to start. That's all automatic now. The point is, your gas mileage and the amount of pollution your car puts out is directly dependent on the ratio, and it's precisely calculated by computers, and they don't want you messing around with it because you're not going to do it right, and your car's going to run horrible. It's going to carbon up the engine, you're going to pollute the atmosphere, and in general burn a lot more gas or stall the engine out, right? So it doesn't make sense to let people mess with that, right? Probably another somewhat humorous thing is we all have brains, and thank God our brains have a skull around them, because we don't want people to be able to reach up and mess with our brains directly, right? What's going on in there is private. And we don't want them damaged. We want them to work correctly, and we don't even understand how they work, frankly. I mean, we have all sorts of theories of, about neuroscience. Nobody has a full understanding of the operation of the brain. So let's let it do what it does without trying to modify it, right? And so the concept here is an object is like our brain, right? It deals with inputs and outputs, but don't get into the inside of it unless you actually know what you're doing, right? It's likely that it's not going to work right if you play around with the innards, right? And this is true on all sorts of devices. It's true on your phone, right? There's all sorts of things in there going on that you have no idea about and you don't need to know about and they don't want you to know about. So that's objects in C++. Again, they're very similar to Python, but a little, but much, not just a little, a lot tighter. And it fully embraces this concept of information hiding. The things inside, how a class works, you don't need to understand it. You only need to understand its interface to use it. Okay, so read the book on this, okay? This is important. And, you know, and then attempt to do your blackjack assignment. You know, even though I've given you more time on the hangman, I encourage you to start working as soon as possible on the hangman and come to my office hours if you're struggling with it. Because the idea for the blackjack, sorry, for the blackjack, the idea is for you to start at least to get the idea of object-oriented programming as you work on it. Okay. You guys feel a little better about C++ and objects? Good. All right, so we're going to work on files today, and it's not too hard, it turns out, except there's one little piece that's a little bit more complicated, and I'm going to let you work on this. You're probably going to be confused by one aspect of it that's actually not so much about files, but then we're going to hopefully have some time to talk about that afterwards. And so I'm going to let you go into your groups now. So here we go. Stop share. Let me do something here. Co-host. Breakout rooms. Boom.